Guys, good morning. Let me first of all copy the business logic which we were designing yesterday. All right. Now let's start with conversation which we left in between on yesterday's session. So I'll be starting from the same point. So what we are doing, we have gone through the trigger, and first of all, what we are doing is like we are writing the handler class for this particular trigger, something called as trigger handler or a trigger handler factory. Now inside in this handler class, I would be transferring the whole business logic over here. And the business logic which was initially present inside in the trigger, now we have shifted that to the handler class. So ideally in this case, this trigger becomes a logic-less trigger. This trigger becomes a logic-less trigger. Because the logic which was initially present over here has been shifted to another place, to another class, and this class is called as the trigger handler class. Now, so what we are doing over here is for this particular block, the logic which we have written is present inside a method called as handle before insert an update. Now this method, because it's a static method, you can call a static method from any place, not just with execute anonymous window. You can call it from any place. And how to call that is very simple. You just require to give the name of class, name of the class, dot name of the method. So we are, for this particular, whenever this trigger is called, particularly for this event before insert an update, from this moment it would migrate to a method of this particular class. So indirectly this is same. Previously that logic, this complete logic was been written over here. Now we have shifted that logic to another class, into another method rather. We have shifted that whole logic inside a method with this name, and we are calling that method over here in this place where it was supposed to be. So that is the whole idea behind a trigger handler. So it's a pretty simple thing, it's straightforward. But then, here it is showing us a few errors, particularly over here. And why it is showing that error? Because you are asking for trigger.new. In this class, there is nothing called as trigger.new. Invalid loop variable. You are trying to loop it. But when you are trying to loop it, you are trying you are trying to iterate the records from trigger.new. There is nothing called as trigger.new in context of a class. The existence of this body, trigger.new, new map, old map, everything, their existence lies in this universe rather than this one. These are two separate universes. This is a trigger. And these terminologies like trigger.new and new map and old map, these are the terminologies of a trigger, where when when this logic was initially present over here, there was no errors at all. Because in context of trigger, compilers knows, Apex runtime knows, what does it means by trigger.new? What does it means by trigger.new map, trigger.old and trigger.old? Whereas if you have written this inside in a class, it's clearly indicating you this error, and moreover over here as well, because here you are trying to call trigger.old. In both of the cases, it is showing you the error because at this place, within this context of class, Apex runtime engine does not understand what does it means by trigger doctrine. So this we have to resolve, right? This we have to resolve. So how we are going to resolve this? Again, this is very easy to understand unless you don't make it complicated in your mind. It's very easy to understand. I would just ask one question with you. I would just ask one question and you answer me that. You answer me that. Trigger dot new and trigger dot old. Trigger dot new map and trigger dot old map. Internally, what sort of collections they are? Yes. What collection type is trigger dot new and old? What collection type is trigger dot old map and new map? Yes. Yes. Who is going to give the answer for this one? Internally, these are collections. Trigger dot new is a collection. Trigger dot new map is also a collection. Trigger dot old and trigger dot old map. All of them are collections internally. You have learned three different types of collections: set, list, and map. Now, who is going to tell me trigger dot new map, old map? What type of collections they are?
So list
Which
and set.
one? Which one?
Uh, Trigger dot new and dot old.
Mm-hmm.
These are new. And
These are
old map.
list.
Sorry, list and other are map collection. Set collection.
Exactly. Now they are map collection, not set collection, by the way. I guess I have taught this a lot of time and I have repeated the same thing almost maybe 20 times if I'm not wrong. So see, trigger.new is a list collection. Trigger.new map is a map collection. Trigger.old again is a list collection. Trigger.old internally is a list collection. Trigger.old map is basically a map collection. Trigger.old map is basically a map collection. All right. So this is what it is. Now see, here you wanted to have the value of trigger.new. What I'm going to do is, I go to this trigger and we are calling this method, right? We are calling. When calling, I'm sending the value of trigger dot new. I'm sending the value of trigger dot new from here. But we are sending the value of trigger dot new from here, right? From the trigger, we are sending the value of trigger dot new. It's showing the error because we make this method as a parameterized method, whereas its handler does not have this, right? So what I'm going to do over here, I would be collecting this inside a list collection. We are sending what? We are sending trigger dot new. From here, we are sending trigger dot new. What is trigger.new? Trigger.new is a list collection. Now, in this case particularly, because this trigger has been written on account object, right? Trigger.new typically would contain only the records of account because you are firing a trigger on account before insert, update, and delete. But what? Account record. So, this collection, I would be make this collection as account. I would be make this collection as an account. You can give any name. Let me give the name, like LST accounts. LST accounts. So what I'm doing right now is like, I would be sending the value of trigger.new from this place. From this place, I would be sending the value of trigger.new. I would be sending the value of trigger.new from this place. And over here, I am collecting this, over here, I am collecting this inside a collection, a list collection called LST account. And this trigger.new, I would be replacing with LST accounts. I would be replacing this with LST accounts. I would be replacing this with LST account. And you can see that all errors have been gone, right? Still, this would have one error over here at this place. But because we haven't worked on that method, we are working right now onto this one. We're going to resolve that as well. Anyways, so what I did, let's understand it once again. Here, I wanted to iterate. Here I wanted to iterate every account record which was there inside trigger.new. When the same code it was written inside trigger, when the same code it was being written inside trigger, in that context, the Apex runtime engine know what is trigger.new, what is trigger.old and everything. But because you have shifted that logic, you have shifted what happens. You have shifted that logic from trigger. Yes, I haven't saved it over here. That's why it's showing me the error. Yes, I may require. All right, I may require to save this one first of all. Otherwise, this error wouldn't. Yeah, yeah, no problem. There's no errors actually. We haven't been able to save this class. That's why we are getting the error. Don't worry. We can ignore it right now. All right, anyways, yeah, what I was saying. So we were being passing the value of trigger.new every inside in this loop. We were being iterating every account value from trigger.new. But trigger.new is known inside trigger. There is no existence of trigger.new beyond triggers. Right now what you did is like when you shifted the logic inside a class, and when you try to write down inside a class, if you try to write down something called trigger.new map, old map, it would definitely say that I don't understand from where you wanted to iterate, because I don't know what does it means by trigger.new or old map or trigger.new. So we have to understand what these collection internally would represent. If I would be saying trigger.new or old, internally they are list collection. So here you wanted what? You wanted a list collection which would contains all those values of account, whether which are getting inserted, updated, or deleted. I mean, that depends on the logic, obviously. That depends on the logic, obviously. So what I did is like, I transferred the trigger.new from here. While calling this method, I have transferred, I have given the value of trigger.new, and that trigger.new, the trigger.new internally is what? It's a list collection is being collected inside this custom list collection. And then we have supplied the value over here, right? Now, similarly, let me do this for the another one as well. Here, if you can see, we would require the value of trigger.old, and inside in this query, we are calling for old map. We are calling for old map, isn't it? Yeah. So what I'm going to require, this is the same method. I mean, this code, both of them, this business logic as well as this business logic, right? Both of them are the part of this method only, right? So here I would specifically would ask, we would require what? We would require the value of trigger.old as well as old map, right? So trigger.old is a list collection. First of all, it's a list collection, list of account, old map, uh, old, okay. And the second parameter which I would require over here would be a map collection. Would be a map collection to run this query particularly, because we are calling it from the old map. So map of ID comma account, map of ID comma account. Let me map collection, and let me give this name as a list collection. You can give any significant name. That's up to you. That's up to you. So I have make this method as I've made this method as a parameterized method, where the first parameter which I would be seeking for would be a list collection. And we are going to make those adjustments over here. Don't worry. We are going to make those adjustments. But right now, I'm just trying to make you understand from here itself. So what you would require? We require the value of trigger.old. We would be collecting that. We would be collecting that inside in this collection. So I would be replacing this trigger.old with this one. And similarly, here particularly we would require the value of trigger.old map, right? That trigger.old map, we have collected this inside a map collection with this name. So I'm going to replace this name, map collection.keyset, right? Let me try to save this code up to over here. Let's see what we have. Yeah, it has been saved. Now let's move on to this one. Let's move on to this one. All right, let's make the adjustments over here as well. So what should be called when it's a before delete? What should be called? This one, handle before delete. How you are going to call it? So first, what you require is, you just require to copy the name of class dot name of class dot handle before delete, right? Handle before delete. This is the method which is required. Now, this method, when it is getting called, it should contain two things. List collection represents trigger.old, trigger.old, whereas map collection represents trigger.old map. So those two parameters, I would be supplying it from here. Those two parameters, I would be supplying it from here. I'm supplying trigger dot value of trigger dot old, and I'm also supplying the value of trigger dot old map. Now let me save this, and we'll not going to see any error. Yeah, everything has been gone. All right. So this is a trigger, something called as a logicless trigger. For the events, whatever the logic you require, you have constructed a separate class for that. And this logic has been shifted to another class called as handler class, trigger handler class. And this type of trigger, which does not contains any business logic, rather is called as something, a logic-less trigger. And this is the way the triggers are always written in real time. In the real time, mostly, this one is a best practice. Not everyone follows this. It depends like, do you know this or not, right? So it all depends like how you have been trained, whether the coding, the style of coding, what you have learned, that completely depends on to this fact that who has given you that training, right? Who has given you that training? If you remember, let me I just wanted to add one small discussion. If you remember, we have constructed a trigger where we made certain fields as mandatory. Yeah, this one. Yeah, this one, right? You remember this trigger? I guess that was the very first trigger. Yeah. This was the very first trigger that we have created, right? Where we made a certain fields as mandatory. Now the style which we have written, I can show you something like, this is the same way which I used to create in real time. Let me try to show you something. So there is no difference between what I used to taught you and what I do in my real time codings. Target trigger. Yes. See, I have constructed a trigger on an object, target object. This is my trigger. It's a certain different logic. And there were few, I wanted to, no, this was something, deduplication. Yeah. So not just, there was a trigger we created for deduplication. Maintain the uniqueness. Yeah, this one, sorry, I was wrong. We have created a trigger for deduplications. We have created a trigger for deduplication. Now let me show you something. Let me show you something. So the way you guys are learning is the same what I used to code in real time. And there is no difference. I make a code a little more optimized sometimes. Yeah, that could be a difference. And for you guys, I make it more elaborated because for you, understanding the code is very important. And I wanted to hide the complexities as far as possible. But real time में हो सकता है मैं थोड़ा सा उसको और compact कर I'll make it more optimized. वही एक डिफरेंस हो सकता है, लेकिन लॉजिक में कोई डिफरेंस नहीं होता है. मैं जिस तरह से आप सभी को पढ़ाता हूँ, कोर्स बताता हूँ, उसी तरह से मेरा मेरा कोडिंग स्टाइल वही है, जिसमें हम सारे बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस को फॉलो करते हैं एंड वी ट्राई टू मेक द कोड एज एफिशिएंट एज पॉसिबल. थोड़ा सा ऑप्टिमाइज नहीं रहता है आपके केस में, बिकॉज अगर मैं ऑप्टिमाइज करूंगा तो हो सकता है आपको उसकी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी बढ़ती हुई नजर आएगी एंड यू मे एंड अप with a thought like this is something which is complicated to understand. I don't wanted you to realize. I don't wanted you to think like this. So that could be a little thing जिसमें थोड़ा सा मैं कोड को extend कर देता हूँ just to make it more readable and more easy to understand. Otherwise, the logic is absolutely same, guys. There is no difference. Okay, so have that confidence in your mind that whatever you are coding is from a real time scenario. Whatever the way you are coding is again with the real time scenario, right? So have that confidence. Now see what we did. We converted this trigger, account trigger. We have initially written that trigger. We converted this trigger into a logic-less trigger, and then we entirely shifted the logic into another class, and that class is called as handler class. Now, whenever after learning this after learning the test classes, we would going to cover this trigger. Right now, see, the code coverage is none. This trigger cannot be deployed to production. This trigger cannot be deployed to production because to deploy a trigger, it must at least have 1% of code coverage, which we are not obtaining right now, obviously, which we are not obtaining right now. We are not obtaining it right now. So the code coverage we are going to understand when we would be learning that test classes. Now to create a test class, we must have a handler class, and that is what I just have created. We're going to write the test class for this handler class, and this would be covered. This would again get it covered, right? So this is what it is. All right. So go with this by today, and then one more thing would be like, uh, I mean, what you have. I'm keeping this for you because I wanted you to write this down because we have created all these triggers, right? These all are the triggers that we have created. Contact trigger we have, create contact, and then contact trigger we have, and then we also have hiring manager trigger. We also have a lead trigger. Account we already have converted, right? Account we already have converted. Now see what I wanted you to convert this all triggers into logicless trigger. I wanted every one of you to convert this into logicless trigger. So for every one of them, create contacts, contact trigger, hiring manager, lead trigger. I wanted you to shift that business logic. This whole business logic, I wanted you to shift it inside a class. I wanted you to shift the whole business logic inside a class and make all of them, make not just this one, make all of them as a logicless trigger and write down the handler classes for all. Because see, understand one thing, if you don't do this assignment, you would be having a very less cases for the test classes. If you honestly convert them all, which is very easy as you have seen, which is very easy. If you convert them all, then you at least would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 real-time problems for which you can write down the test classes. You will having more examples with you. Otherwise, there would be only one example, this one. So that is the reason I'm telling you to go with this. If you find any difficulty while conversion, you can definitely ping me on the WhatsApp group, not on my personal chat, please. I don't recognize anyone by their name. I haven't stored anybody's number on my mobile phone. So there's only one way of communication, and that is your group only. So if you face any difficulty while this conversion, you can simply take a screenshot. For that, don't take photographs. Please install this software, Lightshot, right? Please install this software called Lightshot. And with the help of this, just take a screenshot, just take a screenshot like this. And then send it to your group mentioning what difficulty you are facing with that conversion. Go with this. Go with this. You at least have 4 more examples for the practice, which is more than enough. So if you would really do these practices honestly, this is not a topic which you would feel that this is a tough topic. It's a difficult topic. All right. That's all for today. Tomorrow I would be discussing, or let me complete a small thing. This is just a theoretical thing, triggers best practices. I would cover, because tomorrow I'm going to start with the next topic, which is test classes. So there are certain best practices with trigger. Go with this. It's a theoretical thing. आप ही पढ़ लो इसको. पढ़ लो इसको. आप ही लोग पढ़ लो. I just would highlight few things like, see, I have written for if you are deploying a trigger, you should maintain 1% of the code coverage. Trigger should always be a bulkified trigger. Where it has been written. If there is a problem of recursive trigger, जैसा मैंने आपको दिखाया है, एक problem हम उसको solve करेंगे, but after test classes. तो स्टैटिक बूलियन वेरिएबल से उसको हटाना पड़ता है. हमने एक प्रॉब्लम फेस किया है वो रिकर्सिव ट्रिगर्स का. एंड देयर इज अ बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस, वी शुड ऑलवेज ट्राई टू मेंटेन 1 ट्रिगर पर ऑब्जेक्ट. जैसे आपने देखा कि मैंने अकाउंट ट्रिगर को एक्सपैंड किया और लॉजिक मैंने अकाउंट ट्रिगर में ही लिखा. ठीक है. इवन इन दिस केस एज वेल, ये जो आपको दिखाया मैंने यहाँ पर भी, आई हैव फॉलोड दैट बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस के आई वॉज हैविंग वन अनदर लॉजिक, एक लॉजिक और था मेरे पास में, बट मैंने उसको अलग से नहीं बनाया. आई जस्ट, आई मीन, दिस इज अ सेपरेट लॉजिक. This one is a separate logic, although, and this is also a separate business logic, but I have clubbed that inside the same trigger. All right, so we usually follow this best practice as far as possible. We always try to have only one trigger per object. If there is already a trigger has been created, we'll try to, we'll try to incorporate our code into the same one. Try to write down the code, our business logic, the new business logic. We try to insert in the same one, and we avoid as far as possible to have multiple triggers per object. And why this? Because see, the triggers, whenever they run, we don't have any control which is going to run first and which is going to run later. We don't merely have any control on the running of triggers, on the execution of triggers. That's why we'll try to have this best practice. And then, yeah, so it is recommended to have a trigger handler factories, right? So I this is a best practice to construct a logicless trigger. That means instead of writing the logic inside trigger, you make it shifted in another class. That class is called as handler. But see, I am telling you what these all are the good practices, best practices, recommended things by the Salesforce. But not it's not compulsory that everyone follows. It's all knows. It all depends. Like, how, do you know this or not? डू यू नो दिस और नॉट? अभी मुझे बताओ, किसी को अगर इस बारे में बताया ही नहीं गया है कि ट्रिगर्स को लॉजिक लेस ट्रिगर्स बनाया करो, जबकि उसका लॉजिक कहीं और शिफ्ट कर दिया करो। अब अगर किसी को ये बताया नहीं तो उसकी गलती क्या है? वो तो अपना सारा बिजनेस लॉजिक ट्रिगर में ही लिखेगा। उसको प्रॉब्लम जाएगी कहाँ पे? जब वो उसका माइग्रेशन स्टार्ट करेगा। तो ये चीजें इस तरह से काम करती हैं। तो बेसिकली आपको, आप जिस वे से आगे बढ़ रहे हो, दैट इज द बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस। वी आर फॉलोइंग द ऑल द रिकमेंडेड थिंग्स फ्रॉम द सेल्स फोर्स, एंड वी आर लर्निंग इट इन द सेम वे। ठीक है, तो विथ ऑल गुड हैबिट्स वी आर ग्रोइंग इन द प्रोग्रामिंग पार्ट। बस ठीक है, इसको पढ़ लेना जो कुछ भी है बाकी। एंड देन ट्रिगर एग्जीक्यूशन, ये तो आई गेस आई हैव ऑलरेडी शेयर्ड अ डायग्राम फॉर दैट। एक डायग्राम दिया था मैंने आपको जिसमें सेल्सफोर्स ऑर्डर ऑफ एग्जीक्यूशन था। इफ आई हैवंट गिवन, जस्ट सी टू योर व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप, एक बार चेक कर लो, मैंने आपको दिया था शायद। ठीक है, सो टुमारो आई एम गोइंग टू स्टार्ट विद द टेस्ट क्लासेस। बाय द वे, टेस्ट क्लासेस इज गोइंग टू बी द लास्ट टॉपिक ऑफ डेवलपमेंट। इसके बाद था विजुअल फोर्स प्रोग्रामिंग, और which I believe I have already shared that things to you. कोई कंफर्म करो जरा सा मुझको। Let me stop the recording first of all.